Next up, a pain that's top of the league, the sports injury.
The most common pain we feel is one we've all experienced. It's what happens when you play football in the park. Strains, sprains, bruises. We call those soft tissue injuries. Greg, that is seriously out of order.
These injuries cause acute pain, but they're simple to treat if you know the right steps.
So we're going to show you what these steps are. First, we need a sports injury. Ah, Dr. Jack, just the man. Now his arm's recovered, it's time to put his whole body on the line. I've volunteered Dr. Jack to take part in an up-and-coming sport, mixed martial arts, otherwise known as cage fighting.
That looks horrible.
Welcome to the Octagon of Pain. This is where I'm going to put Jack tonight with Nick the Headhunter Chapman, a professional fighter 30 kilos heavier than Jack.
Luckily, Jack is a black belt in martial arts, so he's in no danger.
But one thing that he is going to be is in pain.
I'm Nick the Headhunter Chapman. It's nothing personal, Dr. Jack. Enjoy the evening.
Fired up. Nervous excitement, are you?
Unbelievable, yeah.
Just keep moving, mate. Keep moving, you're going to be all right.
I've briefed the Headhunter to target Jack's legs and give him as many bruises as possible to help me with my experiment.
In the red corner, weighing in 100 kilos, Nick the Headhunter Chapman!
Looks like the Headhunter's feeling nervous too. He's roped in celebrity cage fighting champion Alex Reed for support.
And in the blue corner, standing 5 foot 8 inches tall, at 68 kilos, Jack Crindler!
Oh, come on, Jack! Come on, Jack! Come on, go on!
The doctor looks in trouble, Chapman dead in the legs. The crowd not best pleased.
Actually, this is pretty serious. He's a big unit and he is hurting Jack. Come on, Jack, let's do it!
Dr. Jack is receiving a classic sports injury. Soft tissue bruising which will lead to swelling and plenty of pain, which is perfect for the next stage of my experiment.
Straight into him! He's almost at it now. I think he's almost at it.
And switches to an armbar.
Call this match a draw! I'm sorry, Nick. It's a
Amazingly, the ref has called it a draw. But what kind of injuries has Dr. Jack suffered at the feet of the Headhunter?
But there's some acute sports injury there, no doubt about it. How much pain?
Everywhere.
Serious pain, yeah?
Everywhere. Head.
Everywhere, yeah.
There's no doubt Dr. Jack's in pain. Great. That's what I need to show you how simple it is to relieve it. Inside Jack's body, the damaged cells and blood vessels are leaking fluid, causing swelling, which leads to pain. So what do we do about it?
So the treatment is?
Rice.
Rice, exactly. Rest, ice, compression, elevation.
Rice is a 4-step treatment which, if followed in the first 3 days of a soft tissue injury, can really speed up the healing process and ultimately stop pain.
Let's pop the legs up on the chair for me. That's lovely.
The first letter in Rice, R, stands for rest. If moving his leg causes pain, this is Jack's body's way of saying stop, I need to take it easy.
Now we need that ice, and our favourite icing mechanism
Is our peas.
is peas.
That instantly feels better.
Good.
I stands for ice. Putting ice on the injury can reduce swelling and therefore pain. But don't put ice directly on the skin and for no longer than 20 minutes at a time.
Next thing we really need to do is actually get some compression.
Okay.
Lucky for you, I've brought a wonderful pair of compression tights. So they are really, really tight.
C stands for compression. Compression brings down swelling by stopping fluid collecting around the injury. And there's one last step.
So at night, I'll elevate this on a pillow.
Exactly.
But this one I'll just keep
Perfect.
as is.
E means elevate the injury above the heart so that any fluid moves down and away from the injury. Following RICE can reduce swelling and therefore reduce pain quickly and effectively. It's nearly 3 days since Dr. Jack clashed with the headhunter. Time to check his sports injuries. Has RICE, rest, ice, compression and elevation, made a difference?
And look at this here.
At that.
The white shaded area on Jack's untreated leg shows the extent of the bruising, whereas on the other leg, the one I treated, there's no bruising at all.
Massive.
Wow.
You know, this is classic soft tissue injury, and there's a lot of damage being done to that right leg.
And that's why it's still so much more painful and so much less mobile.
Absolutely right. The key thing here for me is look at the left leg.
It's gone.
Absolutely nothing at all.
It's completely gone.
You look at the difference between the two, just with something as simple as rest, ice, compression, elevation.
It's the gold standard.
Just amazing though, isn't it?